Thanks for coming, everybody. It's great to get to see you all. I love stories of all kinds, but I am particularly fond of the stories of Edgar Allan Poe. And he's a fascinating guy. So, here's what we're going to do. In just a moment here, I'm going to quit being me for a little while. And instead, well, we'll see what he has to say. Here we go. See ya. From childhood's hour, I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from the common spring, and from the same source I have not taken my sorrows. I could not rouse my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I've loved alone. Then, in childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn in me from all the depths of good and ill, the mystery which binds me still, from the torrent and the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me, flashing by, from the thunder and the storm, and the cloud that took the form when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view. I wrote that poem in 1829, when I was 20 years old. And it seemed to both sum up my life so far and lay out a course for the future. A course of otherness and aloneness in the midst of the great throng of humanity. But that gets ahead. I was born January 19th, 1809. In Boston, to David and Elizabeth Poe. My parents were actors. They were playing King Lear at the time. I'd like to think that my name was borrowed from the play. I'd like to imagine, too, that perhaps in those first few months, if a script called for a small child, maybe my mother carried me on stage. My mother was a star. Oh, she played the leads in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Richmond, Nassau, Charleston, all the great cities. Everywhere she went, oh, people adored her. The newspapers could not say enough about her. My father, not so much. He was a passable actor at best. He never got leads, and he certainly never got the good reviews that my mother did. No. One New York newspaper referred to him as muffin-faced. Within a year of my birth, our father was gone, thrown into debtor's prison in New York. And that's the last we knew. Whether he lived, died, no one knows. Within a year of that, our mother was gone too, taken by tuberculosis in Richmond. And we children, we were scattered. My older brother William was sent to Baltimore to live with the Poes. My new baby sister Rosalie was taken in by the Mackenzies there in Richmond, and me, I was taken in by Mr. and Mrs. John Allen. Mrs. Allen had been a particular friend of my mother's, and they wanted a child, and they got me. Now, Mr. Allen was a wealthy Scottish immigrant. He had come to America poor and realized very quickly the road to aristocracy in the United States is paved with dollar bills, and he set about accumulating as many as he could. He traded in everything: tombstone, tobaccos, lumber, slaves, whatever he could make a buck off of. He was determined to be a gentleman. And when it came to me, well, I was a guest in their home. Alan never adopted me. And he never let me forget that I was the orphan child of actors. Now, he may not have approved of my parents' work, but he was not above taking advantage of my abilities. No, by the time I was 5, I could read and recite and sing. When he gave dinner parties, he would stand me up on the long Virginia table, give me a glass of watered wine to toast the health of the guests with. I learned young. I was an adorable child. Of course, Adorable children invariably become teenagers. And that's where it began. Alan and I could not see eye to eye about anything. All we did was argue and fight. So when I turned 17, he sent me off to the new University of Virginia to try to learn how to be a gentleman. Thomas Jefferson's vision for educating the youth of America had only just opened the year before. The university's honor court was very strict. The rules forbade drinking and gambling and firearms, and the wealthy sons of Southern planters, why they ignored all of those rules. Everyone carried a pistol in his coat pocket and was ready to draw it at a moment's notice for a duel. The drink of choice on campus? Peach brandy mixed with honey. Oh, it went down smooth. And that is perhaps the reason why the card games never went well. No, I very quickly acquired about $2,000 of gambling debt. Debt that Mr. Allan refused to honor. Oh, he wanted me to learn to act like a gentleman, but he resented what I actually did. He cut off my money, which meant I could no longer pay for school. And my career at the university ended, almost before it began. Well, I wasn't going to go back home, not to Richmond. Not like that, no. So the spring of 1827 saw me fetch up at Boston, city of my parents' stage triumphs. I thought it would be a good revenge on Mr. Allan to make a name on the stage. And there are programs from that spring that list E.A. Poe as one of their actors. Far more importantly, though, at Boston, I enlisted in the Army under the name of Edgar A. Perry, age 28. I'd actually just turned 18. But you know, I was a good soldier. In 3 years, I went from private to sergeant major. Farthest I could go as an enlisted man. You may have heard some of the stories about my adventures. That I followed Lord Byron to Greece to act as a freedom fighter. It's a wonderful story. I wish it was true. No, my time was spent at Fort Moultrie. Do you know what they have at Fort Moultrie? Nothing. Nothing except humidity and mosquitoes. It was an awful life. And I ran up against a wall. There was no path for me to become an officer as an enlisted man. No route to becoming a gentleman. I began writing to Mr. Allan. I said, "Sir, if you could see a way to helping me get discharged and then enrolled as a student at West Point, then I could go on to become an officer." Allan refused to even answer my letters. No, it took letter upon letter upon letter and the intervention of my commanding officer before he finally relented. And that fall term, I became a cadet at West Point. If I had thought that Army life was dull, the routine incredibly stifling, the rules unbearable, what made me think that West Point would be better? From the moment I arrived, I hated it. And I set about getting myself dismissed. And by January, I achieved my goal. Yeah, January saw me court-martialed for dereliction of duty and disobedience, and I was expelled. I took refuge in Baltimore, at the home of my aunt, Maria Clem. And you know, that's where life truly began. So I started writing. My older brother, William, was a reporter, but he was often too drunk to finish his articles. So I finished them for him. And even more, there at Baltimore, well, that's where I met Virginia. My Aunt Maria's daughter, my cousin. And Virginia was, she was sunshine and life itself. Amazing and wonderful, and after a suitable interval, we found ourselves at the courthouse filling out a marriage license. Edgar A. Poe, age 26, my real age this time. Virginia Clem, age 21. Now, we did have to lie on the marriage certificate. Because you see, if you were under 21, you had to have witnesses. And we had no witnesses for our ceremony. And of course, Virginia had just turned 14.
Oh, God.
Well, it was a long time ago. In the South. No, look, we were so happy together. Almost like, I don't know, brother and sister or something. We sat together in the evenings. I taught her algebra. It was delightful. I picked up a job. I became one of the editors of the Southern Literary Messenger, one of the great papers of the South. We moved to Richmond, me, Virginia, and Aunt Maria, under my supervision. The Literary Messenger grew from a few hundred subscribers to a few thousand. Everyone wanted to read it. My stories were getting national notice. After The Gold Bug was published in the magazine, oh, that adventure of code breaking and lost treasure, I put out a follow-up article. I said, send me your codes. Send me your ciphers and your puzzles. I guarantee you I will be able to solve them all. And they came in by the hundreds. And of the hundreds and hundreds of codes and ciphers and puzzles that came to me, I broke them all. And you know, in spite of the paper's success, the owner, T.W. White, he fired me anyway. He wrote to a friend, he said, well, Edgar is a likable and reliable young man, yes, but oh, he cannot refrain from excessive conviviality. Excessive conviviality. Yeah, he was calling me a drunk. The truth is, he was a Philistine and wouldn't have known good literature if it bit him on his prodigious backside. Well, we didn't need him anyway. No, my writing was recognized now. There was only one place for a good writer to live, and of course that was New York. And so that's where we went. And we failed. New York had nothing for us. And so we retreated to Philadelphia. I took up editing again. I became the editor of Goody's Ladies Book and Graham's Monthly, two of the finest magazines there are. And we had some security, if not prosperity, enough for a little house, a harp and a piano for Virginia. It was wonderful. We sat together in the evenings, I writing, Virginia playing and singing, Aunt Maria keeping the house. Oh, it was good. And then, one evening in 1841, Virginia was playing, and she had a coughing fit. And when the coughing finally subsided a couple of minutes later, her handkerchief, as she drew it away from her mouth, it was dotted with blood. I said, don't worry, no, it will be fine. You've been singing too much, you've strained your voice, that is all. It will be fine. I knew I was lying to myself. Well, I'd seen tuberculosis too many times. But I tried to pretend otherwise. But I couldn't get that blood-covered handkerchief out of my mind. The Romantics were very much in sway with their far-off kingdoms and fairy tale princes, all the while ignoring the nastiness of the world around them. New York was laboring under a cholera epidemic. So I took that blood-covered handkerchief, and I took their fairy tale prince, and I twisted them together into a nightmare that would grip the imagination of the country. The Red Death. It had long devastated the countryside. No pestilence had ever been so fatal or so hideous. Blood was its avatar and its seal. The redness and the horror of blood. It began with sharp pains and sudden dizziness, followed by profuse bleeding from the pores, the scarlet stains upon the body, and especially the face of the victim, with a pest ban that cut him off from the aid and the sympathy of his fellow men. And the entire seizure, progress, and termination of the disease were the incidents of half an hour. But Prince Prospero was happy, and dauntless and sagacious, and when his dominions were half depopulated, He summoned to his side 1,000 of his friends from among the light-hearted knights and dames of his court. And with these, he withdrew into the deep seclusion of one of his castellated abbeys. This was a vast and magnificent structure, the product of the prince's own august, if eccentric, imagination. A high and lofty wall girdled it in. These walls had gates of iron. The courtiers having entered, they brought furnaces and massy hammers and welded the bolts shut. Oh, they resolved to leave neither ingress nor egress, to the sudden impulse of frenzy from without or despair from within. The abbey was amply provisioned. With these precautions, the courtiers might well bid defiance to contagion. The outside world could take care of itself. In the meantime, it was folly to grieve, or to think. No, the prince provided all of the appliances of pleasure. There were buffoons and improvisatore and ballet dancers and wine and music and beauty. All of this and security were within. And without was the Red Death. Now, it was toward the 5th or 6th month of their seclusion, when the pestilence raged most furiously abroad. Prince Prospero decided to entertain his 1,000 friends with a masked ball of the most unusual magnificence. It was a voluptuous affair, this masquerade. But first, let me tell you the rooms in which it was held. They were 7, an imperial suite. Now, in most palaces, such suites form a long, straight vista. The folding doors go back nearly to the walls, so the view of the whole is scarcely impeded. Here, as might be imagined, the case was quite different. No, the rooms were so irregularly disposed, vision could embrace little more than one at a time. There was a sharp turn at every 20 or 30 yards, and at each turn a novel effect. To the right and left on each side was set a tall, narrow Gothic window, which looked out on a closed corridor that followed the windings of the suite. These windows were of stained glass, whose color corresponded to the prevailing hue of the room on which it entered. That at the eastern extremity, for example, was blue, and vividly blue were its windows. The second chamber was green in its ornaments and its furnishings, and here the casements were green. The third was purple throughout. Here the panes were purple. The fourth was furnished and lit with orange. The fifth with white. The sixth with violet. The seventh chamber was closely shrouded in heavy black velvet tapestries that hung all over the ceiling, down the walls, falling in heavy folds upon a carpet of the same material and hue. Here, however, the color of the windows failed to correspond. Here the panes were scarlet, a deep blood color. Now, in no one of these 7 chambers was there any lamp or candelabrum. No, there was no light of any kind. But in the corridor that followed the suite, there stood opposite each window a heavy tripod of iron that bore a brazier of fire, which projected its rays through the colored glass and thus glaringly illumined the rooms, and thereby were produced a multitude of gaudy and fantastic appearances. And indeed, the effect of that firelight streaming through the blood-colored panes upon the sable hangings would produce so ghastly a look upon people that few, if any, were brave enough to set foot there at all. Now, on the western wall of this 7th chamber, there stood a massive clock of ebony. Its pendulum swung to and fro with a dull, heavy, monotonous clang. And when the hands had made the circuit of the face, and the hour was to be stricken, there came forth from the brazen lungs of the clock a sound that was clear, and rich, and deep, and exceedingly musical, but of so peculiar a note and emphasis that at the lapse of an hour, the musicians in the orchestra were constrained to pause momently in their performance to hearken to it. And thus the evolutions of the waltzers ceased, and, well, there was a brief disconcert of the whole company. And while the echoes of the chime lasted, it was observed the giddiest grew pale, and the more aged and sedate passed their hands over their brows, as if in confused reverie or meditation. But when the last echo had fully sunk away, a light laughter at once pervaded the assembly. The musicians smiled at each other and made whispered vows that the next chiming of the clock would produce in them no similar emotion. But 60 minutes passed, which embraced 3,600 of the seconds of the time that flies. And again there is this disconcert and nervousness and tremulousness. But in spite of these things, oh, it was magnificent. The prince was the guiding hand behind the movable settings and the ornaments and the costumes. Be sure they were grotesque. There were bizarre fantasies, such as the madman fashions. There were arabesque figures with unsuited limbs and appointments. There was much of the beautiful, much of the wanton, and not a little of that which would excite disgust. To and fro, in fact, there stalked within these 7 chambers a multitude of dreams. And these, the dreams, they writhed in and out, taking hue from the many-tinted windows and causing the wild music of the orchestra to seem but as the echo of their footsteps. And ever and anon there strikes the ebony clock that hangs in the hole of the velvet. And then all is still. All is silent save the voice of the clock. The dreams are stiff frozen as they stand. But the echoes of the chime die away. They have endured but a moment. And a light, half-subdued laughter floats after them. And the music swells, and the dreams live and writhe to and fro more merrily than ever. But to the room which lies most westwardly of the 7, there are none who now dare venture. The night is waning. A ruddier light flows through the blood-colored panes, and to him whose foot falls upon the sable carpet, there comes from the near clock of ebony a muffled peal, more solemnly emphatic than anything that reaches the ears of those who indulge in the more remote gaieties of the other apartments. Oh, but these other apartments, they were densely crowded, and did then beat feverishly the heart of life. And the dance went whirlingly on, until at length there commenced the sounding of midnight upon the clock. And now again there was this disconcert, and nervousness and tremulousness, as I have said before, an uneasy cessation of all things. Now, there were 12 hours to be sounded by the bell. Perhaps more of thought crept with more of time into the minds of the thoughtful. Perhaps, too, individuals had leisure to become aware of a figure who had aroused the attention of no single individual. And as word of this presence spread, there arose a buzz or a murmur expressive at first of shock and disapprobation, and then of terror and of horror and disgust. Now, in an assembly of phantasms, such as I have described, it may well be imagined no ordinary figure would arouse such emotion. Indeed, the masquerade license of the night was virtually unlimited. But the figure in question had out-Heroded Herod, had gone even beyond the prince's own indefinite decorum. There are chords in the hearts of even the most reckless which cannot be touched without emotion, even for the utterly lost, to whom life and death are equally jests. There are things of which no jest may safely be made. The figure was tall and gaunt and dressed from head to foot in the habiliments of the grave. The mask was made so closely to resemble the face of a stiffened corpse that the closest scrutiny would have had difficulty detecting the cheat. And all that might have been endured, if not approved of, by the revelers. But he had gone so far as to take on the type of the Red Death. Oh, its vesture was dabbled with blood, and its broad brow was bedewed with the scarlet horror. When the eyes of Prince Prospero fell upon this figure, who with slow and stately step, as if to more fully sustain its role, stalked to and fro among the waltzers. Oh, his face blanched. And then his brow reddened with rage. Who dares thus make a mockery of our woes? Uncase this varlet, that we may know whom we have to hang at sunrise from the battlements. It was in the blue room that he said these words. And they rang out through the 7 chambers, loud and clear, for he was young and strong, and the orchestra had stilled with the wave of his hand. He was in the blue room, with a group of pale courtiers by his side. And at first there was a slight movement toward the figure, who was also near at hand, but somehow there was no one who put forth hand to seize him. He passed within a yard of the prince's person. The entire vast assembly, as with one impulse, shrank from the centers of the room to the walls. So he passed unimpeded from the blue room to the purple to the green, and the orange, and the white, and even then to the violet. Then Prince Prospero, maddened with the shame of his momentary cowardice, rushed headlong through the 6 chambers. He bore aloft a drawn dagger, and it approached in rapid impetuosity to within 3 or 4 feet of the retreating figure. The latter had just gained the extremity of the velvet apartment, when it turned suddenly and confronted its pursuer. There was a sharp cry, and the dagger fell gleaming upon the sable carpet, upon which instantly afterward fell prostrate in death Prince Prospero. Then the courtiers, seizing the wild courage of despair, hurled themselves into the black chamber and seized the figure which stood erect and motionless. And they gasped in unutterable horror at finding the grave clothes and the corpse mask untenanted by any tangible figure. And now was acknowledged the presence of the Red Death. He'd come like a thief in the night. And one by one dropped the revelers in the blood-bedewed halls of their revels. And each died in the despairing posture of his fall. And the life of the clock went out with the last of the gay. And the flames of the tripods expired. And darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all. That story started a string of successful pieces. Most of them you didn't read. But editors wanted them, and sometimes they even paid for them. But still, there was not the financial security that I wanted. I arranged a lecture tour. I traveled all along the eastern seaboard, stopping in schools and lyceums, town halls, churches, theaters. I lectured on the poetic principle. Did not have the financial rewards I'd hoped for, but I did find one remarkable thing. I found admirers. Everywhere I went, I was surrounded by a flock of beautiful maidens in gauzy gowns who wrote poetry to their Israfel, their angel of music, while they languidly inhaled ether. All my life I searched for that ideal of womanhood. Too often it was taken from me. My mother, Mrs. Allen, my friends' mothers, even Virginia eventually. In poetry, perhaps the most exalted topic on which one could write is a beautiful woman. And the topic with the most pathos, the most emotion, surely is death. And therefore, I would propose to you that the most poetical thing in the world must be the death of a beautiful woman. I wrote Annabel Lee in 1849, 2 years after the death of my own child bride. And there's a good deal of Virginia there. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know, by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maid, she lived with no other thought than to love, and to be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child, in this kingdom by the sea, but oh, we loved. With a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged seraphs of heaven envied, her and me, so that a wind came out of a cloud by night, chilling my Annabel Lee. So her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, and shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels! Not half so happy in heaven when envying her and me, and that is the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that a wind came out of a cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of many far older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of my beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling. My darling, my life, and my bride. In her sepulchre there by the sea. In her tomb by the sounding sea. Well, by 1843, I was well tired of Philadelphia, of editing other people's work. I desperately wanted my own journal to publish only what I knew was worthy. We returned to New York. I returned to editing. I became the drama critic for the Daily Mirror and the Broadway Journal. I bought the Broadway Journal, and it mercifully died about a year later. But if again I could not find financial success, I did find something wonderful in New York. Oh, I found a supply of the bizarre that would last me the rest of my life. I asked for a newspaper when I came in, and I was very pleased to have been given one. I'm surprised to say that I don't think newspapers have changed all that much in the last 160 years. You laugh. You don't believe this, do you? But you see, you're wrong. This is all true. All of it. No, I can prove it. Hark. It was a chilly November evening. I had just consummated an unusually hearty dinner, and I was seated alone in the drawing room, with my feet up by the fire. In the morning, I had been reading Wilkie's Epigoniad, Barlow's Columbiad, Griswold's Curiousities, Lamartine's Pilgrimage. In short, I am willing to confess I now felt a trifle stupid. I attempted to rouse myself with several glasses of Chateau Lafite. This failing, I betook myself to a stray newspaper in despair. I perused the column of houses to let, column of dogs lost, the two columns of wives and apprentices run away. I then set about with great resolution to read over the editorial matter. And having read it over from beginning to end, without understanding a word of it, I conceived the possibility of it being in Chinese. And so read it over again from end to beginning, but no better result. I was about to throw it down in disgust when the following paragraph aroused my attention. The avenues to death are numerous and strange. A London paper mentions the decease of a man from a singular occurrence. It seems the man was playing at Puff the Dart. The game is played with a needle inserted in some fabric and blown at a target through a tin tube. The man inserted the needle into the wrong end of the tube. Drawing his breath strongly to puff the dart with force, he drew the needle into his throat. It entered the lungs and in a few days killed him. Oh, please. This is a contemptible falsehood. The miserable lees of some pitiable penny-a-liner, some concoctor of, accidents in cocaine, These individuals, knowing the extravagant gullibility of our age, set about their minds with the imagination of odd accidents of improbable possibilities. But to an inquiring mind, like mine, I added in parentheses, it should become obvious at once that the remarkable increase of these occurrences lately is by far the most singular occurrence of all. I myself vow henceforward to believe nothing that has anything of the singular about it. Mein Gott denn, what a fool you be for that! Strangest voice I'd ever heard. At first I took it for a rushing sound in the ears, such as a man hears when getting very drunk. I say you must be drunk as the pig, for to not see me here as I sit before you. Well, I could see looking under my nose, and there confronting me across the table sat a personage. Nondescript, but not altogether indescribable, no. His body was, you see, his body was a rum barrel. Inserted into the nether extremity were two kegs that seemed to answer the purpose of legs. Dangling from the upper portion of the carcass were two tolerably long wine bottles with the necks outstretched for arms. All the head the monster possessed was one of those Hessian canteens that looks like a snuff box with a hole in the middle of the lid. And through the hole he was emitting certain rumbling and grumbling noises that it took for intelligible speech. I say you must be bigger fool than the goose, for to not believe what is print into print. Is this the truth? Every word of it. Who are you? How did you get here? What are you doing here? As for how I come here, that is my business. As for what I be doing what I think proper. As for who I be, that is the very thing I have come to show you. Look upon me. I am the angel of the odd. Oh, odd enough too. I was always under the impression that angels had wings. Triffinia, what do you take me for? A chicken? Well, no, I'm sure you're not a chicken. Chicken have the wing, and the owl have the wing, and the imp have the wing, and the head devil have the wing, yeah, but the angel have not the wing, and I am the angel of the odd. Well, what is your business with me? Oh, what a low-bred puppy it is to ask a gentleman and an angel about his busyness. No, that was more than I could take, even from an angel. Seizing a salt shaker that was near at hand, I hurled it at the head of the intruder. Either my aim was off or he ducked. All I succeeded in doing was shattering the crystal that protected the clock on the mantelpiece. The angel evinced his sense of my assault by giving me, 2 or 3 hard raps on the head with one of his bottle arms. Ow! This at once reduced me to submission, and I'm ashamed to say that either through pain or vexation, there came a few tears to my eyes. Oh, dear now. You must either be very drunk or very sorry. You must not drink it so strong, yeah. You must take the water vid divine. Now, here, you take that, drink that, be a good boy, don't cry. The kindness of the angel mollified me in no little sense, and aided by the liquid with which we refilled my glass several times, I was able to sit back and listen to his extraordinary discourse. It seems that he was the genius whose job it was to bring about those odd accidents that so confound the skeptic. Oh, he talked on and on at great length. I amused myself by leaning back in my chair and munching raisins and flipping the steps around the room. Somehow the angel construed this as contempt. Oh, he arose in a great passion, uttered some threat that I did not really understand, made a low bow, and departed. The departure of the angel afforded me no little relief. I felt inclined to take a nap. Some 15, 20 minutes, which is my usual custom after dinner. I consulted my watch. It was 5:30. At 6, I had an appointment of some import that it was vital that I keep. You see, the policy of insurance for my dwelling place had expired the day before. Some dispute having arisen, I arranged with the board of directors to meet them at 6 to set terms for renewal. I could easily walk to the insurance office in 5 minutes, and my postprandial siestas had never been known to exceed 5:20. I composed myself to my slumbers forthwith. Having completed them to my satisfaction, imagine my surprise when, glancing at the clock, I saw that instead of my usual 15 or 20 minutes, I'd been asleep for only 3. I resumed my nap. Having completed my slumbers a second time, I was inclined to believe in the possibility of odd accidents. It still wanted 27 minutes of the hour. I consulted my watch. It was in fact 7:30. And having slept for 2 hours, of course I had missed my meeting. But that was okay. I could call in the morning and apologize. But in the meanwhile, what could have happened to the clock? Well, it seems that one of those raisin stems that I was flinging around the room had flown through the fractured crystal and lodged itself, singularly enough, in the keyhole, thus arresting the motion of the minute hand. Normal accident. The kind of thing that will happen from time to time. I gave the matter no further thought and retired to bed at my usual hour. I placed a candle on the reading stand and set about the perusal of a few pages of The Omnipresence of the Deity. I fell asleep in less than 20 seconds, leaving the candle burning. My dreams were full of the angel of the odd. I awoke just in time to see a rat make off with a lighted candle, but not in season to prevent him from escaping with it down his hole. In moments, a suffocating odor assailed my nostrils. I perceived that the chamber was on fire. And in moments, the entire room was wreathed in flames. All egress was cut off except the window. The neighbors quickly procured a long ladder, and I was descending in apparent safety when this hog, about whose entire personage there was something of the angel of the odd, when this hog, I say, took it into his head that his left shoulder needed scratching. He could find no more convenient rubbing post than the foot of the ladder. In short, I was precipitated and had the misfortune to fracture my arm. This accident, along with the loss of my house and my insurance, and the more serious loss of my hair, the whole of which was singed off in the fire. These things predisposed me to serious inclinations. I decided it was time to marry. I set about the conquest of a wealthy widow, disconsolate with the loss of her 7th spouse. She yielded a reluctant consent to my importunity, and I knelt at her feet in gratitude. She lowered her luxuriant tresses into close contact with those, supplied to me temporarily by Grandjean. I know not how the entanglement occurred, but it did. I arose with shining head, wigless. She, in wrath and disdain, hath buried an alien hair. Thus ended my hopes of the widow. It's okay. I resolved to set about the conquest of a less implacable heart. And for a period the fates were propitious. However, seeing my beloved in an avenue thronged with the elite of the city, I hastened to present one of my best prepared bows when, a particle of dust lodging in my eye rendered me for the moment completely blind. And when I opened it, the lady of my love had passed on by, irreparably affronted at my premeditated rudeness in passing her by ungreeted. I now considered it high time to die. I therefore took myself to the nearest river. Here, having divested myself of my clothing, for why should we not die as we are born? I was about to plunge headlong into the icy current when a passing crow made off with the most indispensable portion of my apparel. Postponing, therefore, for the moment, my suicidal designs, I just, slipped my nether extremities into the sleeves of my coat, and I hurried along over the ground with all of the speed that the situation required and the circumstances allowed. And as I ran with my nose in the air, intent only upon the purloiner of my property, I suddenly perceived that my feet rested no longer upon terra firma. I had hurled myself over a precipice, and should no doubt have been dashed to pieces had it not been for my good luck in grasping the guide rope of a passing balloon. I quickly understood the situation in which I now stood, or rather hung. I attempted to make my presence known to the aeronaut above me, but either the fool could not, or the villain would not perceive me. I was about to let go, when I heard a low humming. And there over the edge of the car leaned the angel of the odd. Help! Oh no, not I! Help yourself and be damned! And he let fall a heavy bottle of Kirschenwasser, which hit me square on the head and made me imagine my brains had been entirely dashed out. I was about to give up the ghost with a good grace when he cried out, "Hold on! Hold on now, don't be in such a hurry, huh? Do you believe now, at the last? Do you believe in the possibility of the odd? Yeah. And do you believe that I am the angel of the odd? Yeah. And do you acknowledge that you be the blind drunk and a fool? Yeah. Then place your right hand in your left hand breeches pocket in token of your full submission to the angel of the odd. This thing I found it impossible to do. In the first case, of course, my left arm having been fractured in the fall, if I let go with my right, I would have to let go entirely. And of course, we could have no pants until we caught the crow. I was forced to shake my head in the negative, indicating that I found it inconvenient just at that moment to comply with the angel's very reasonable request. Go to the devil, then. And he drew a sharp knife across the rope. We happened to be passing at that moment over my house, which had been handsomely rebuilt during my peregrinations, and I tumbled headlong down the ample chimney. When I came to my senses, my feet were groveled in the ashes of an expired fire. At my elbow, the wreck of a small table with ruined desserts. And at my head, an empty bottle of Kirschenwasser. And thus revenged himself, the angel of the odd. Now, of course, if you were speaking to a less sober individual, you could chalk that up to a drunken spree. Oh. But let me share with you a little bit that I wrote to a friend once about my early days in Richmond. I said, I was never in the habit of drunkenness. No. But my system had a delicacy and a fineness that could not withstand an excitement that was an everyday matter to my friends. And what with the spirit of Southern conviviality held out on all sides, well, it did happen that occasionally, from time to time, I was completely intoxicated. So you see, I was not a drunk. I was sensitive. Now, one evening in 1844, I had gone with a friend to see the opening of a new play. Oh, it was terrible. It was so bad. By the end of the first act, I had the entirety of the next day's review written. I spent the rest of the play at the back of the theater talking with a playwright I knew. He was working on a new piece, and he thought it would be terribly effective if, as the hero's mother lay dying, if a large raven would fly into the room. It's the last thing I heard him say. No doubt people going down the streets that night stopped to look at the man going from street lamp to street lamp, scribbling down notes. Because, of course, the most terrifying ghosts are the ghosts that our own minds create. Ghosts of pain and loss, sorrow, that will not allow us to drink the nepenthe, the ancient liquor of forgetfulness, or will not allow us to feel the healing balm of Gilead, the ancient salve that could cure all wounds. In the Raven, bone-crushing sorrow and unremitting remorse, they combine to take on physical form. Once, on a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. Some late visitor, I muttered, entreating entrance at my chamber door. Only this and nothing more. And distinctly I remember. It was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, and vainly had I sought to borrow from my books, so cease from sorrow. Sorrow for the lost Lenore, for a rare and radiant maiden whom the angels named Lenore. Nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before. So that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, to some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. That is it, and nothing more. Presently my soul grew stronger. Hesitating then no longer, sir, I said, or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so faintly came you tapping, and so softly came you rapping at my chamber door that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. The silence was unbroken, and the darkness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, Lenore? This I whispered, and the echo whispered back the word, Lenore. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning. Presently I heard it tapping, something louder than before. And surely, said I, this is something at my window, lads. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. It is the wind, and nothing more. Open here I flung the shutter, and with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. And not a moment stopped or stayed he, not the least obeisance made he, but with mien of lord or lady perched above my chamber door. Perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. Perched and sat. Nothing more. This ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grim and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Ha! Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven sitting lonely on that pallid bust, spoke only that one word, as if in that one word his soul he did outpour. Not a feather then he fluttered, not a syllable he uttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have gone before. On the morrow thou wilt leave me as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, nevermore. Well, this ebony bird beguiling all my sad soul into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. And upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this grim and ghastly, gaunt, ungainly, ominous bird of yore meant in croaking, nevermore. As I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the bird whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. Some more I sat divining with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er. But whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press it nevermore. And I thought the air grew denser. It was perfumed from an unseen censer swung by seraphim, whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God has sent thee. By these angels he hath lent thee respite. Respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget thy lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, I said, thing of evil, prophet still, whether tempter sent or tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet all undaunted, in this desert land enchanted, in this home by horror haunted. Tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, I said, thing of evil, prophet still, by the heaven that bends above us, by the God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within that distant Aden it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting. Bird or fiend, I shrieked up starting. Get thee back into the tempest and the nice Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of the lie thy soul has spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Get thy form from off my door. Take thy beat from out my heart and thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon that is dreaming. And the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. $5. $5 the editor paid for that. And the day after, every newspaper in the country picked it up for free. When you think about life in 1846, I would imagine it is as foreign and strange to you as your day is. I mean, who was president then? Yet nobody we remember now. It's all right, we didn't pay much attention to him at the time either. But you know, our differences are not so great. We keep our newspapers as red with blood as you do. We love, we hate, we play, we fight. Perhaps the biggest difference is mental illness. I mean, it was a constant in our world. Everywhere. No one knows what causes it. Now we know. cleaning your stove with all of that lead was a bad idea. There was no way to treat these things. So much of my writing looks at what happens to a mind when it is broken, when it's twisted and turned by pain and loss and sorrow and anger. What will they say? How would someone justify themselves? Yes, nervous, yes. Very, very dreadfully nervous I was, and I still am. Why would you say that I am mad? No, the disease has sharpened my senses, not dulled them, not diminished them. Look, above all is my sense of hearing acute. I can hear all things in heaven and in earth. I've heard many things in hell. Why then would you say that I am mad? No, hearken! Observe how calmly, how healthily I can tell you the whole thing. It's impossible to say how the idea first entered my brain, but well, once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object that there was none. Passion, there was none. I loved the old man. I had no desire for his gold. He'd never given me insult. No, it was his eye. He had this vulture eye, all pale blue with a hideous film over it. Whenever it fell on me, it made my blood run cold. And so, by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus rid myself of the eye forever. See, now there is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. You should have seen how I proceeded. With what skill, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the entire week before I killed him. And every night, just at midnight, I turned the latch of his door and I opened it. Slowly, until I had an opening sufficient for my head. I then thrust in a dark lantern, all shut tight, so no ray of light shone out. And when I had that in place, I then thrust in my head. It took me an hour that first night to get my head in so far that I could see him as he lay on the bed. I opened a slight crevice in the lantern carefully, for the hinges creaked, until a single thin ray fell upon the eye. And this I did every night, just at midnight, for 7 long nights. But I found the eye always closed, so it was impossible to do the thing. It was not the old man that vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning I went boldly to his room. I greeted him heartily, calling him by name, inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have had to have been a very perceptive old man indeed to have ever imagined that every night, just at midnight, I looked in on him while he slept. Now on the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more swiftly than mine. I had never before felt the extent of my power, of my sagacity. I mean, to think he'd lay there. Never to think or dream of my secret deeds against him. I positively chuckled at the thought, and perhaps he heard me. He moved on the bed as if startled. Now, you may think I drew back, but no. No, the room was black as pitch. The shutters were close fastened through fear of robbers. I kept going steadily. I had my head within the room. I was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped on the catch. He sprang up in bed and cried out, "Who's there?" For an hour, I did not move. And I did not hear him lie down again either. Presently, I heard a low groan. And I knew it was a groan of mortal terror. And it was not a groan of pain or of anguish. No, it is the low, stifled sound that comes up from the bottom of a soul when overcharged with awe. I knew that sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, while all the world slept, it has welled up to the bottom of my own soul, deepening with its dreadful echoes the terrors that distracted me. I say I know it well! I pitied him. But I chuckled at heart. He'd been laying there ever since the first slight noise. And his fears had been steadily growing on him. No, he tried to tell himself things like it is a mouse crossing the floor, or it is the wind in the chimney. It is a cricket that has made a single chirp. He's tried to comfort himself with these suppositions, but all in vain. All in vain, because death, in approaching its victim, is stalked with its black shadow before it. And it is that unperceived shadow that caused him to sense, rather than see, my presence in the room. When I had waited a long time, very, very patiently for him to lie down, I decided to open a slight, very, very slight crevice in the lantern, so that a single ray, like the filament of a spider's web, fell full upon the eye. It was open. Wide open. I could see it with perfect clarity, for I had directed the ray precisely upon the damned spot. Now, I've told you that I am nervous, and that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses. Now there came to a new sound to my ears. It was a low, dull, quick sound. Much as sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. Oh, I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. And the sound of it roused me to fury, like the beating of a drum stimulates a soldier to courage. But I held on. I did not move. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker, louder, louder, I say! I've told you I am nervous, and so I am. And now, at the dreadful night, in his old house, the sound roused me to terror. It's still louder, louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new fear occurred to me. No, the sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a yell, I leaped into the room. He shrieked once only, and then I grabbed him, dragged him to the floor, and pulled the heavy bed on top of him. I smiled to find the deed so quickly done. The heart beat on, but with a muffled sound it would not be heard. Presently it ceased. I pulled away the bed. I bent down to examine the body. I put my hand on his chest. I held it there for many minutes, but there was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If you still fancy me mad, you will no longer, when I describe the wise precautions I took for the disposal of the body. The night waned, I worked swiftly, but in silence. First, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off his head. And then the arms and the legs. There was no mess, no blood, no, a tub caught all. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring, and I deposited all between the scantlings, and then covered again, so thoroughly not even he would see it. When my labors were done, it was 4 o'clock. still black as midnight. As I descended the stairs, there came a knocking at the street door. I answered with a light heart. What had I to fear? 3 men introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A scream had been heard in the night. Suspicion of foul play aroused, and these men sent to search. The scream was mine in a nightmare. Oh, the old man was absent in the country. I bade the men come search. Search well. I took them through the house, showed them his treasures undisturbed. In my enthusiasm, I brought chairs to his rooms, and there bade them rest from their labors. And in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, I put my own chair precisely upon the spot beneath which reposed the corpse of my victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner persuaded that we talked, and as they chatted, I answered of familiar things, and ere long I wished them gone. Oh, my head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it arose and gained in distinctness, until I realized it was not within my head. No doubt I now grew very pale, but what could I do? I mean, it was a low, dull, quick sound. Much a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I talked more freely, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and argued about trifles in a high key with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced to and fro as if roused to fury by the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. I took my chair and grated it upon the floorboard. I foamed, I raved, I swore. The noise arose over all and steadily increased. Oh my God, did not see it, hear it? No, they heard, they saw, they knew they are making a mockery of my horror. That I think, this I know. And now, hark again, louder, I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I thought I must scream or die. Gentlemen, I admit the deed. Here, take up the planks, hideous the beating of his hideous heart. Virginia died in 1847. Her tuberculosis, our constant poverty, I couldn't make it work. Her death nearly destroyed me. She shivered there, up in the loft of our little cottage in Fordham in the Bronx. Her only blanket, my greatcoat from West Point. With her gone, life became unbearable. Aunt Maria tried. I wrote to a friend, I said I was sensitive, nervous to an unusual degree. I became insane with horrible periods of sanity. And in those intervening periods, I drank. God only knows how much and how often. But my friends rallied. They brought me back from the brink. In the spring of 1849, I returned to Richmond, to the town of my boyhood. And there I met Sarah Royster. Oh, she had been the first great love of my teenage years. Her husband had just died. All through that summer, we courted. And in August, in celebration of our engagement, I accepted the oath of the Order of the Sons of Temperance. Swore off alcohol forever. October 1st, I had to go north for a few days to do some work. When I went down to the docks that night, I was sick. Something was wrong. I went to the doctor, and in my confusion, I took his walking stick from the stand instead of my own. When I said goodbye to Aunt Maria at the dock, I did not know it would be the last time I would see her. I don't know what happened over those intervening days. Friends said they saw me in New York and in Philadelphia, but they found me in Baltimore, delirious, in a gutter. They carried me to Washington College Hospital, offered me water. I refused it in terror. I seemed to be recovering, and then lapsed again into delirium. And on October 9th, 1849, 40 years old, I met an end. And all of my friends and my enemies, they clucked their tongues and they said, oh, the poor man, who could not resist the temptations of the world and died of alcohol poisoning. Perhaps. But you know, a number of years ago, Dr. Michael Benitez, who was a surgeon at Washington College Hospital, he was doing a review panel. And the panelists gave him a file folder marked EP. He went through the doctor's notes. The patient was brought in delirious, refused water in terror, appeared to make a recovery, relapsed again into delirium and hydrophobia and death, which are not symptoms of alcohol poisoning. But they are very clear symptoms of rabies. Huh. My cat's name was Katerina. Could have gotten it from her. A lonely, painful, misunderstood death. It's appropriate. The spring of 1849 saw me looking back on life and looking ahead to what might come. I'll leave you with these thoughts. Take this kiss upon the brow, and in parting from you now, this much let me avow. You are not wrong, who deem that my days have been a dream. And yet, if hope has flown away, in a night or in a day, in a vision or in none, is it therefore the less gone? All that we see or seem is just a dream within a dream. I stand amid the roar of a surf-tormented shore, and hold within my hand grains of the golden sand. How few, yet how they creep through my fingers to the deep, while I weep. While I weep, oh God, can I not grasp them with a tighter clasp? Oh God, can I not save one from the pitiless wave? Is all that we see or seem just a dream within a dream? Thank you.
Do you want to answer something?
Yeah, you got questions? I can make up an answer. Yes, sir.
Okay, when did you first get the idea to do this, and how long did it take you to memorize it so that you could go for an hour without interruption and do it so magnificent?
Oh, thank you. You know, I've been performing this piece for more than 20 years now. I was working in a museum, and we needed some fall programming. And I said, hey, how about we do some Poe? I knew a lot of the poetry already because I just love it. And I'm an old Baptist, so I grew up memorizing. You know? You just do, and so my brain leans toward memorizing stuff. I first found Poe, I would have been in late elementary school. We were on the way home from Ottumwa, visiting my grandparents, and my sister's lit book was there in the back seat, and I picked it up, and it opened to the Cask of Amontillado.
Yeah.
See?
You used that one. That's one of my favorites.
It's a wonderful piece.
Yeah.
For the love of God, Montresor. It's awesome. So yeah, that's where it came from. Yeah.
So how do you separate yourself from him when you're so engrossed in him for extended periods of time and repeatedly? I know you're doing this again Wednesday.
Yes. You know, I suppose that's that can be a danger that you know, get all melancholy. I'm too chatty and extroverted to get very melancholy, though. That really is the case. And it's too much fun, you know. It's just an awful lot of fun. So, yeah. You know, the rabies theory I like a lot, and it works very well for this piece. It is by far not the only theory about Poe's death. At the time, the doctor took very bad notes, and he dined out on the story for the rest of his life, but he changed it constantly. So he embellished on the story for decades afterward. So nobody knows exactly what happened. The other really popular theory is that perhaps he died of election fraud. Which is appropriate for this time of year. Because when they found him, it was election day in Baltimore. And he was found in a gutter outside of a polling place. A saloon. Because why should we not vote where we can drink, right? And in Baltimore, and other cities too, but Baltimore especially, election day could be very, very dangerous and deadly. Because competing factions would go out, they'd grab some unsuspecting man, haul him in somewhere, force liquor down his throat, take him in and make him vote, and then drag him somewhere else, change his clothes, put more liquor in him, take him to another place. You could take him to a dozen polling places. And if you resist, you get beaten. And certainly all of that alcohol can be fatal. Poe was there outside of a polling place. He was delirious and he was not wearing his own clothes. So it's entirely possible that he had been cooped. Other folks will say whether he died of it or not, he had to have had tuberculosis because he couldn't have lived in that close a proximity to Virginia without getting it. But stats say, in 1847, 85% of the population had tuberculosis. They just didn't all die. Yikes! But it can cause brain lesions, and one of the things that it can do is make you hypersensitive to alcohol. Because, when folks wrote letters back and forth when they wrote about Poe, one of the things they did not talk about was his drinking. They said, we're not used to seeing Mr. Poe drink. But he was one of those people that one drink could knock you out. And so, our picture of Poe, you have a picture of him right in your head, and what he was like, drunk, melancholy, probably drugging, maybe womanizing. All of that comes from one source, and that was Rufus Griswold. Rufus Griswold was a writer at the time. He and Poe were best frenemies. Yeah. Of course, in America at this point, writing was still young, and if you were going to review somebody's work, you were going to say nice things about them because you want them to succeed. Poe didn't feel that way. He thought he was going to be honest, and so he said what he thought. And nobody else in America was as good a writer as he was.
That's true.
And he let him know. And man, he just savaged Griswold. Just ripped him up one side and down the other. And somehow Poe still made him his literary executor, put him in charge of all of his papers and letters. And Griswold wrote the obituary. And the obituary goes, Mr. Poe is dead. I doubt anyone is surprised, and I don't imagine anyone will mourn. And then he went on from there and creates this image of Poe. When he published Poe's letters, he went through and rearranged them and rewrote them to put in lovely things about himself. It took scholars 150 years to sort out all of the damage that he had done. So be careful who you leave your stuff to. Maybe burn all the letters. I don't know. There's a great book. Do you guys have A Mystery of Mysteries? You might. It's called A Mystery of Mysteries, The Something Life and Dumping Death of Edgar Allan Poe. It's a newer book, just a few years old. And it's a fun biography because it starts with his death and works its way backwards. Yeah. And it works hard to correct a lot of the misinformation about it. Because again, we only have the photographs, right? And he don't look happy in those pictures. And granted, one of them was taken 2 weeks after he tried to kill himself. And he couldn't even get that done right. He didn't take enough laudanum. He just got really high and really sick. But again, when people wrote about him, and they talked about him in their letters, they said, man, this guy's fun. He is silly and childish and playful. They played leapfrog in the front yard. And they had fun. When he walked down the streets in New York, groups of children would run along behind him making raven noises. And then he'd turn and go, "Nevermore!" And he was fun. As a young person, he was athletic. He loved to brag that when he was 14, he swam 7 miles up the James River against the tide, just to show he could do it. And then he discovered peach brandy mixed with honey. That really was the end of athleticism. He was a good soldier. Yeah, so he was a cool guy. Read more of his stuff. Read his comedies. Nobody reads the comedies anymore. Largely because they're about people in his time period and we don't get the jokes anymore, you know? And he loved, The Angel of the Eye is a story about fake news, right? Yeah. He was passionate about fake news. He loved it so much. Because remember, 2/3 of what was in a newspaper in 1846 was fake news. It was just made up. His most famous one was called the balloon hoax. He must have been in, I don't think he was in Baltimore, I think he was in Philadelphia. But he put a story in the paper that originally came from Charleston, he said, that this English balloonist had flown across the Atlantic Ocean in 2 weeks and had all these amazing adventures, and every paper in the country picked it up, and people were like, "Oh my gosh, this is going to revolutionize life!" And they went, "Ha, psych." And so, he had fun doing that, and so did everybody else. There was one that came out about the same time that said the English astronomer William Herschel had discovered people and cities on the moon. There were illustrations and everything. And again, every newspaper picks it up. It's in the newspaper. It must be true. Just like stuff on Facebook. My children now, they take my phone and they go, "No, Dad. That's not real." But I wanted to be real. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Is this your main career? Has it always been storytelling?
I am a storyteller, yes. So
Okay.
I spend my time running around telling people stories. I love this. I love Iowa history. I love U.S. history. I love fairy tales and folk tales. Come back at 4 o'clock. We'll do not terribly scary stories, but we'll have a lot of fun. So, if you feel guilty coming, by yourself, grab a young person. There will be snacks, apparently, so. Yeah, you get a snack if you come at 4.
At 4 o'clock, yes.
Yeah.